The last time I saw my mother cry, it wasn't at my father's funeral. It wasn't when my sister announced she was moving across the country. It was 3 weeks ago, in a lawyer's office in downtown Portland, when I slid a single sheet of paper across a mahogany table and said, "This is the moment you stopped being my family." And for the first time in 31 years, she had nothing to say. No excuse, no manipulation, no tears she could weaponize. Just silence. And the sound of a $5 million inheritance vanishing like smoke. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And before I tell you what happened in that lawyer's office, I need to tell you about the summer I turned 31. The summer I realized my family had never loved me. They had only ever needed me. What I discovered 3 months later made everything I thought I knew look like a lie. Let me start at the beginning, because the beginning is where the cracks first appeared. And cracks, if you ignore them long enough, become canyons. Before I continue, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Have you ever been the family member who gives everything and gets nothing in return? Have you ever shown up, paid up, and shut up while everyone else took their turn at the center of attention? If yes, hit like and subscribe right now. This channel, Andrea's Revenge Stories, is for every woman who has been told she's too sensitive, too dramatic, or too difficult simply because she refused to be a doormat one more time. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. I'm recording this from a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, and I promise you, by the end of this story, you're going to understand why I don't answer my phone on Sundays anymore. And if you've ever had a family member steal from you, lie to your face, or rewrite history to make you the villain, comment receipts so I know you're my people. Some of you already know where this is going, but trust me, you don't know the half of it. Let's get into it. My name is Elena, and for the first 27 years of my life, I believed that if I just tried harder, worked more, gave more, loved more, I would finally matter to my family. Spoiler alert, I never did. And the sad part? I didn't even realize it until I was 29 years old, standing in my mother's kitchen, holding a misdirected text message that would change everything. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in Beaverton, Oregon, just outside Portland. My mother, Diane, was a real estate agent who specialized in selling luxury homes to people who actually had money. My father, Richard, was a civil engineer who worked 60-hour weeks and drank himself to sleep most nights. And then there was my sister, Jessica. Jessica was 2 years younger than me, blonde, athletic, and absolutely incapable of doing anything wrong. At least, that's how my mother saw it. Let me give you an example, and I want you to tell me in the comments, would your family have done the same thing? When I was 12, I came home with a report card that had 4 A's and 2 B's. My mother looked at it, sighed, and said, "Well, I guess you're not getting into Stanford with those B's." When Jessica was 14, she came home with 2 C's, 3 D's, and 1 F. My mother framed it. I'm not joking. She literally put it in a frame and hung it on the refrigerator because Jessie tried so hard this semester, and look, she passed English. I stood in that kitchen, staring at her F in algebra, and something inside me cracked. At that moment, I should have realized the truth, but I didn't. I was 12. I still believed my mother loved me. I still believed I just needed to try harder. Tell me in the comments, at what age did you realize your family played favorites? I'll wait. But I didn't say anything, because that's what I learned to do. Keep quiet, work harder, make myself useful. Maybe then they'd see me. By the time I was 18, I had figured out the only way to get any attention from my mother was to be useful. Not lovable, not interesting, not even present. Useful. I worked 3 jobs during high school. I babysat the neighbors' kids, I cashiered at a grocery store, and I cleaned houses on weekends. Every penny I earned, I gave half to my mother. She said it was family contribution. I thought it was love. It wasn't. What it was the beginning of a pattern I wouldn't recognize for another 13 years. When I graduated, I had saved exactly $4,000, enough to put a deposit on a crappy studio apartment near Portland State University and pay for my first semester of community college. My mother's reaction? Finally, you're not eating my groceries anymore. No congratulations, no hug, no we're proud of you. Just relief that I wasn't costing her money anymore. But here's where it gets worse. Jessica, on the other hand, dropped out of community college after 6 weeks. My mother paid for her apartment in downtown Portland for 2 years. $2,000 a month, plus utilities, plus a living stipend of $500 a week. I found out about the stipend because I was still on the family phone plan back then, and I accidentally saw a text from my mother to Jessica that said, "Sent the $500, don't tell your sister." I was 22 years old, working 40 hours a week at a call center, going to school part-time, and skipping meals so I could afford my bus pass. And my mother was sending Jessica $500 a week to find herself. Tell me honestly, would you have confronted them right then? Or would you have done what I did and stayed quiet? I stayed quiet, because that's what the good daughter does. The good daughter doesn't make waves. The good daughter doesn't demand fairness. The good daughter just keeps giving. And that's exactly what they counted on. But here's the thing. I didn't get angry. I got determined. I told myself that if I just kept working, kept building, kept pushing, eventually they would see my worth. Eventually, my mother would look at me the way she looked at Jessica. Eventually, I would be enough. That eventually never came. But my bank account did. From ages 22 to 29, I became a machine. I finished community college, transferred to Portland State, and graduated with a degree in accounting. Not because I loved accounting, but because I knew it would pay the bills. And it did. By 25, I was working as a staff accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Portland. By 27, I had been promoted to senior accountant. By 29, I was making $85,000 a year. But I was still living like I made $30,000. My apartment was a 400-square-foot studio with a bathroom so small I could brush my teeth while sitting on the toilet. I drove a 2008 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that had been on for 3 years. My friends thought I was being cheap. My coworkers thought I was saving for a house. The truth was much sadder. I was saving because I thought if I had enough money, my family would finally respect me. I was wrong. And the proof came in the form of a phone call on a Tuesday night in October. That's when the requests started. It began small. My mother called and said she was short on a mortgage payment. Could I help? Just this once? At this point, what would you have done? Comment, help, or no. I'm serious. I want to know. I transferred her $2,000. A month later, she called again. Jessica's car had broken down and she needed a new transmission. Could I help? Just this once? I transferred her $3,000. 6 weeks later, my father's drinking had gotten worse, and he needed to go to rehab. My mother couldn't afford it. Could I help? Just this once? I transferred her $15,000. That was the first time I really felt it. That hollow feeling in my chest when I realized I wasn't helping. I was enabling. And they weren't grateful. They were entitled. but it got worse. Because after the $15,000, my mother called me 3 weeks later and asked for another $5,000 for house repairs. I said no, and the silence that followed was so loud I could hear my own heartbeat. She didn't call me for 2 months. Not to check on me, not to see how I was doing. Just nothing. Then Jessica called. She was crying. She said she had been diagnosed with a condition that required expensive fertility treatments if she ever wanted to have children. Could I help? Just this once? Tell me, would you have believed her? I transferred her $12,000. That was the last time I said yes without asking questions. But the questions should have started much earlier. Here's what I didn't know at the time. Jessica wasn't trying to have children. She was trying to pay off credit card debt from a shopping spree she'd taken to Paris with her boyfriend, a man I had never met but who apparently had very expensive taste in handbags. And my mother knew. She knew the entire time. She was the one who had co-signed Jessica's credit card. She was the one who was getting collection calls at the house. She was the one who looked at her golden child and said, "Don't worry, your sister will pay for it." How did I find out? A misdirected text, and what I read made my blood run cold. In April of 2021, I was visiting my mother for Easter. It was a horrible weekend. My father was drunk by 10 in the morning. My mother spent the entire time comparing my life to Jessica's. Jessie just bought a new car. Jessie just got promoted at her boutique. Jessie just got back from a trip to Napa. Never mind that I had paid for that car. That boutique was a part-time job at a consignment store, and that trip to Napa was paid for by a man Jessica had met on Tinder 2 weeks prior. But here's the moment that changed everything. The moment I stopped being naive and started being observant. On Sunday morning, I was making coffee in the kitchen when my mother's phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it without thinking. The text was from Jessica. It said, "Did Elena transfer the money yet? I need to pay the card before they report it to collections." I stood there, coffee mug in hand, and felt the world tilt. I want you to imagine that moment. Imagine realizing that your own sister invented a fake medical condition to steal from you. Imagine realizing your mother helped her plan it. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled back through our texts. 3 weeks earlier, Jessica had sent me a long, tearful message about her fertility treatments. The specialist's name, the clinic's address, the heartbreaking details about her diminished ovarian reserve. All of it was a lie. I took a photo of the text on my mother's phone. Then I walked into the living room, sat down on the beige couch that had been in that house since I was 7, and said, "Mom, what is Jessica talking about? What card?" And here's what my mother said. I will never forget these words as long as I live. She didn't even flinch. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Elena, you've always been so dramatic. You're imagining things. And honestly, you don't need that money the way Jessie does. She has a life to build. You have your job. You don't need that money the way Jessie does." Those words, those 11 words, they told me everything I needed to know about my place in that family. I was not a daughter. I was a resource. And resources don't get explanations. They get used. I stood up, walked out the front door, and drove back to Seattle without saying goodbye. But on the drive home, something shifted. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first time I started keeping receipts. And receipts, as you're about to see, are a dangerous thing to leave in the hands of someone who has nothing left to lose. For the next 6 months, I kept my distance. I still answered my mother's calls, but I stopped transferring money. I still responded to Jessica's texts, but I stopped offering help. And then my 30th birthday happened. This is the moment I want you to really pay attention to, because this is when I should have walked away forever. But I didn't, and I paid for that mistake. My 30th birthday was on a Saturday. I had mentioned it to my mother 3 times in the weeks leading up. I didn't want a party. I didn't want gifts. I just wanted a phone call, a text, some acknowledgement that I existed. The day came. I waited by my phone. Nothing. At noon, I sent a text to the family group chat. "Hey everyone, just checking in. It's my birthday today. Hope you're all doing well." My mother responded, "Happy birthday, Elena. We're at Jesse's. She got a promotion. We're so proud of her." That was it. No phone call. No, "we love you." No, "wish you were here." Just a dismissal, an erasure, a reminder that I was never the priority. I called my mother that evening. I was hurt. I was tired. I was finally ready to say something. "Mom, it's my birthday. You didn't even call." Her response? "Elena, don't be so needy. You know Jessie needed us today. She's going through a lot." What is Jessie going through? She just got a promotion. She's stressed about wedding planning. You wouldn't understand. You've never had to plan a wedding. You've never had to plan a wedding. As if my entire life, my career, my sacrifices, my loneliness was less valid because I hadn't found someone to marry. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "Okay, Mom." And then I hung up. And that night, I added another entry to my notes app, the one they didn't know existed. September 18th, 2021, my 30th birthday. Mom forgot. Then she made me feel guilty for reminding her. I didn't know it then, but that note would become evidence. And then my father died. It was December 15th. He had a heart attack in his sleep. My mother found him the next morning when he didn't come down for breakfast. I got the call at 6:47 a.m. My mother's voice was hollow. "Your father passed away." I was in my car within 10 minutes, driving from Seattle to Portland in the dark, rain pounding against my windshield, tears streaming down my face. I arrived at the house at 8:30 a.m. Jessica was already there. She was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, scrolling through her phone. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even pretending to be sad. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a sibling grieve a parent by scrolling through Instagram? I'll wait. My mother was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. I went to her. I hugged her. I held her while she cried. And then, 3 hours later, after the funeral home had come and gone, after the paperwork had been started, after my mother had taken a sedative and fallen asleep, I overheard something that made every sacrifice I had ever made feel like a joke. Jessica was on the phone in the backyard. She didn't know I was standing inside the sliding glass door, hidden by the curtain. "Yeah, she's here," Jessica said, laughing. "She drove all the way from Seattle like some kind of hero. Mom's already got her wrapped around her finger again. Don't worry, we'll get the money out of her. She's too stupid to say no." She's too stupid to say no. That's what my sister thought of me. After $94,000, after years of sacrifice, after dropping everything to be there when our father died. I stood there. The rain was still falling. I could see Jessica's breath fogging in the cold December air. She was wearing a cashmere coat I had never seen before, probably bought with the money I had given her for fertility treatments. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I walked back into the kitchen, opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, December 15th, 2021, 11:23 a.m. Jessica said I'm too stupid to say no. She was laughing. Then I went back to my mother's room and sat with her until she woke up. Because that's who I was. The good daughter, the reliable one, the one who showed up. But something was changing inside me. It was small at first, like a crack in a dam, a single drop of water pushing through. By the time the funeral came 3 days later, that crack had become a fracture. By the time the will was read, that fracture had become a canyon. And by the time Jessica announced her engagement, that canyon had become an ocean. And I was ready to drown them all. February 2022, 2 months after my father's funeral. Jessica called me on a Tuesday evening. I was at my desk, working late on a quarterly report, eating cold pizza and drinking room-temperature Diet Coke. "Elena," she said, her voice dripping with fake excitement, "I have the most amazing news." I already knew what was coming. Her Instagram had been hinting at it for weeks. But I let her have her moment. "I'm engaged," she screamed. "Marcus proposed at the top of the Space Needle. It was so romantic. There were roses everywhere." I forced myself to sound happy. "Congratulations, Jessie, that's wonderful. You have to come to the engagement party. It's next month. Mom's hosting it at the house." "Of course, I'll be there." What I should have said was, "Will I be paying for it?" Because I already knew the answer. But I didn't say that. Because I was still the good daughter. Still hoping. Still believing that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. It wasn't. The engagement party was on March 19th. 60 guests. Catered food. An open bar. A live band. A photographer. A videographer. A cake that cost $800. I know how much it cost because my mother sent me the receipts and asked me to help with the expenses. I asked her how much she wanted me to contribute. "Just whatever you can," she said sweetly. "Jessie's on a tight budget with the wedding planning, and you know how expensive everything is these days." I transferred her $5,000. And at the party, no one thanked me. The party was beautiful, I'll give them that. My mother had transformed the backyard into something out of a magazine. String lights, floral arrangements, a champagne tower that looked like it belonged at a royal wedding. Jessica wore a white dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Marcus wore a suit that looked custom-made. They posed for photos like celebrities, laughing and kissing and spinning each other around. And I stood in the corner, holding a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, watching my family celebrate something I had partially paid for. No one thanked me. No one even mentioned me. At one point, I overheard my Aunt Margaret say to my mother, "This is such a beautiful party, Diane. You must have spent a fortune." My mother smiled and said, "Oh, you only get one chance to celebrate your daughter's engagement." Not one word about me. Not one word about the $5,000. Not one word about the $94,000 that had come before. I pulled out my phone and took a screenshot of the bank transfer. Then I walked back inside the house, sat down in my father's old armchair, and started making a list. The list started small. March 2021. Fertility treatment lie, $12,000. December 2020. Car transmission, $3,000. October 2020. Mortgage payment, $2,000. August 2019. Rehab for dad, $15,000. But then I kept going. Further back. Years and years of transfers, payments, and loans that were never repaid. January 2019. Jessica's rent, $1,500. September 2018. Mom's emergency dental surgery, $4,000. May 2018. Dad's DUI lawyer, $7,500. February 2017. Jessica's business startup, $10,000. The total, by the time I finished, was staggering. $94,000. $94,000 I had given to my family over 8 years. Money I had earned by working 70-hour weeks, skipping vacations, eating ramen, driving a car that smelled like despair. And what had I gotten in return? Silence at my birthday dinners. Dismissal when I was struggling. Contempt when I said no. A 30th birthday that went unacknowledged. A father's funeral where I was the only one who cried. I closed the Notes app and looked around the living room. It was quiet now. The party was winding down outside. I could hear Jessica's drunk laughter drifting through the sliding glass door. That was the moment I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to beg for gratitude. I wasn't going to demand repayment. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And when the moment was right, I was going to show them exactly what $94,000 of silence looked like. I just didn't know, at the time, that the moment would come much sooner than I expected. And it would involve a much, much larger number. My father wasn't a wealthy man, but he was a careful one. Despite his drinking, despite his emotional absence, despite the fact that he had spent most of my childhood staring at a television screen, he had done one thing right. He had invested. For 30 years, my father had put money into a retirement account. Not much, just a few $100s a month. But over 3 decades, with compound interest and smart investments, that account had grown into something significant. When he died, the account was worth just over $600,000. But that wasn't the only thing. My father had also inherited a piece of property from his mother, a 20-acre plot of land in the Columbia River Gorge, undeveloped, untouched, and, as it turned out, sitting on top of a valuable basalt deposit that a mining company had been trying to acquire for years. My mother didn't know about the land's value. She thought it was worthless. But I did my research. I didn't know any of this until after the funeral, when my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and slid a manila folder across the worn linoleum. "Your father left everything to me," she said. "The house, the retirement account, the land, everything." I nodded. That made sense. They were married. Of course everything went to her. "But I've decided to split the retirement account between you and Jessica," she continued. 50-50, $300,000 each. I felt my heart skip. $300,000. That would change everything for me. I could buy a house. I could quit my second job. I could finally breathe. "When?" I asked. "Soon," she said. "But there are some things we need to handle first. Jessica's wedding is in 6 months, and she's going to need some help with the expenses. I was thinking you could pitch in a little, just until the money comes through." I should have seen it coming. I should have known that even my inheritance was going to be used as a bargaining chip. But I was tired. I was grieving. I was desperate for my mother's approval. "Okay," I said. "How much?" She smiled. Let's start with $20,000 for the venue deposit. I'll cover the rest for now. I transferred her the money that same day. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was believing her when she said the inheritance was coming soon. From March to August of 2022, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I kept working. I kept sending money. I kept showing up to family events where I was treated like an afterthought. Jessica's wedding planning consumed everything. Every weekend, there was a bridal shower, a dress fitting, a tasting, a floral consultation. And every event, my mother found a way to ask me for money. Elena, could you cover the caterer's deposit? Just until the inheritance comes through. Elena, the photographer needs a second payment. Can you help? Elena, Jesse's dress is going to cost more than we thought. Could you pitch in? I kept a running tally on my phone. By July, I had given them another $37,000. The inheritance, my mother assured me, was still being processed. But here's where I should have known something was wrong. Here's where I should have made a phone call earlier. I didn't, because I still trusted her, because she was my mother. And that trust cost me almost everything. I started to get suspicious in August when I finally decided to call the bank that held my father's retirement account. The conversation went like this. Hello, I'm calling about Richard Covington's account. I'm his daughter, Elena. I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't discuss account details without the account holder's authorization. My father passed away in December. The account should be in probate. A pause. Ma'am, I'm showing that this account was closed in January. Closed? Closed how? Dispersed to the named beneficiary, 100% to Diane Covington. I hung up. Then I called my mother. Mom, I just spoke to the bank. They said Dad's retirement account was closed in January. Where's my half? Silence. Mom? And then she said the words that I will never, ever forget. The words that made everything clear. Elena, I need to tell you something. Her voice was different, colder, more careful. Your father's retirement account was, well, it wasn't as large as I thought. After taxes and fees and other expenses, there wasn't enough to split. Other expenses? What other expenses? Jessica's wedding, for one thing, and the house needed a new roof, and I had some medical bills. You used my inheritance to pay for Jessica's wedding? Elena, don't be dramatic. It's not like that. We're family. We share. We share. She said we share as if I had ever been included in the sharing, as if I hadn't been the one paying for everything for years. I sat down on my bed. My hands were shaking. How much is left? A long pause. About 40,000. I was going to give you 10 and keep the rest for emergencies. $10,000 out of 300,000. She had stolen almost $300,000 from me and spent it on my sister's wedding. Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Was there ever going to be an inheritance for me? More silence. Then she said the words that broke the last thread between us. Elena, you've always been so good with money. You don't need it like Jessie does. She has a family to start. She has dreams. You have your career. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. That was her justification for stealing from me. That I would be fine. As if my dreams didn't matter. As if my life was less important because I hadn't found a husband. As if I wasn't even a person to her. Just a resource. A machine that produced money. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't hang up. I just said, "Okay, Mom, I understand." And then I opened my notes app and wrote down every single word she had just said. Every single word. That was the moment I stopped being the good daughter. that was the moment I started planning. The wedding was on September 24th, a Saturday, at a vineyard in the Willamette Valley that cost $15,000 just to rent for the day. I know the price because I paid for half of it. Tell me in the comments, would you have even shown up? Because I almost didn't. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in a hotel room I had paid for myself. My mother had offered to let me stay at the house, but I couldn't bear the thought of being in that kitchen again, staring at that refrigerator where Jessica's failing report card had been framed. I put on the dress I had bought for the occasion. Navy blue, simple, appropriate. I had considered wearing something more dramatic, but that wasn't my style. My revenge was never going to be loud. It was going to be precise. And precise required patience. I arrived at the vineyard at 2 o'clock. The ceremony was at 4. The first person I saw was my mother. She was standing near the entrance, directing vendors, holding a clipboard, wearing a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. When she saw me, she smiled. Not a warm smile, a satisfied smile. The smile of someone who had won. "Elena, you're here. Good. Can you run to the bridal suite and help Jessie with her veil? The photographer is waiting." Not hello. Not how are you. Not thank you for everything. Just another errand. I walked to the bridal suite. Jessica was sitting in front of a mirror, surrounded by her bridesmaids. 5 women in matching sage green dresses, all of them laughing, drinking champagne, taking photos. When I walked in, the laughter stopped. "Oh," Jessica said, "it's you. It's you." Not, "Thank you for coming." Not, "I'm glad you're here." Just, "It's you." I handed her the veil. "Mom said you needed this." She took it without thanking me. Then she looked at me in the mirror and said, "You know, Elena, you could have at least tried to look happy for me." That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It just clicked into place. I stared at her reflection. "I gave you $94,000 over the past 8 years, Jessie, including $37,000 for this wedding. What more do you want from me?" The room went silent. Jessica's face flushed. "That's not... Mom said you were helping because you wanted to." "Did she also tell you that she stole my inheritance to pay for your dress fittings and your floral arrangements?" One of the bridesmaids dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. Jessica stood up. Her face was red. "Elena, this is my wedding day. Don't do this." "Do what? Tell the truth?" "Get out." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just turned around and walked out of the suite, down the hallway, and into the main hall where 200 guests were starting to gather. And I found my seat, in the back row, where I had always been placed. The ceremony was beautiful, if you like that sort of thing. Vows about forever, promises about partnership. Jessica cried. Marcus cried. My mother cried. I sat in the back row and watched, and I waited. And when the reception started, when the champagne was poured and the toasts began, I waited for my moment. It came at 8 o'clock, and when it came, I was ready. My mother stood up to give the mother of the bride speech. She held a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. She looked elegant, composed, completely in control. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she began. "But most of all, I want to thank my daughters. Jessica for being the light of my life. And Elena," she paused, looked at me, smiled that same satisfied smile. "Elena, for being so generous with her help. We couldn't have done this without you." The room applauded. I stood up. Every eye in the room turned to me. I walked to the front of the reception hall. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. The only sound in the suddenly silent room. I took the microphone from my mother's hand. She looked confused, then alarmed. "Thank you, Mom," I said. "Since we're sharing, I have a few words of my own." My mother's smile faltered. Jessica stopped laughing. Marcus looked at his new wife, then at me, then back at his wife. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and started reading. And I want you to imagine this scene. Imagine 200 people in formal attire, wine glasses in hand, watching a woman in a navy blue dress stand in front of them and tell the truth. From 2015 to 2022, I gave this family $94,000. That's not an exaggeration. I have bank statements, Venmo receipts, and canceled checks to prove it. A woman in the front row gasped. A man near the back whispered something to his wife. I paid for Jessica's car transmission. I paid for her fertility treatments that turned out to be a shopping spree in Paris. I paid for my father's rehab. I paid for my mother's emergencies. I paid for the engagement party. I paid for the wedding venue. I paid for the flowers. I paid for the photographer. Jessica was shaking her head. "Elena, stop! Please! You're embarrassing us!" I didn't stop. I looked directly at her. And when my father died, my mother told me I would inherit $300,000 from his retirement account. But she lied. She spent almost all of it on this wedding. On you. On herself. My mother tried to grab the microphone. "Elena, stop this right now!" I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." Someone in the back row pulled out their phone and started recording. I saw the red light. I didn't care. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse. It was a printout of the bank statement showing the retirement account had been closed in January. This is the statement from the bank. $300,000 was disbursed to Diane Covington in January. By September, less than $40,000 remained. I turned to my mother. "You offered me $10,000 of that." $10,000. As if I should be grateful. My mother's face was red, humiliated, furious. "Elena, you're embarrassing this family." "No, Mom. You embarrassed yourself. I'm just telling the truth." Jessica started crying. Real tears this time. Or maybe they were performance tears. At that point, I couldn't tell the difference anymore. One of the bridesmaids, the one who had dropped her champagne flute earlier, stood up and walked out. Another followed. Then another. The room was splitting apart. I turned to the crowd. 200 guests, most of whom I had never met, most of whom were staring at me with a mixture of shock, pity, and something that looked like admiration. I'm not asking for my money back. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted everyone here to know who they're celebrating tonight. A sister who lies, a mother who steals, and a family that has used me for 8 years and never once said thank you. I set the microphone down on the table. I looked at my mother one last time. Her eyes were wet, but not with remorse, with rage. "Happy wedding, Jessie," I said. Then I walked out. Behind me, I could hear my mother screaming, "Someone stop her!" I could hear Jessica sobbing, "Mom, make her come back!" I could hear 200 people whispering, cameras clicking, phones buzzing. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove back to Seattle. And the entire drive, I didn't cry. I just felt free. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. Because here's the thing about my family that they didn't know. I had been keeping receipts for everything. And I mean everything. Every text, every email, every bank transfer, every phone call I had recorded. Legal in Oregon, for those of you wondering. Every lie, every manipulation, every time my mother said, "Don't tell your sister." I had it all. And 3 weeks after the wedding, I used it. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, ruthless woman named Catherine Chen who specialized in estate litigation. I brought her my folder of evidence, all 147 pages of it. Catherine looked at the bank statements, the text messages, the recorded phone calls. She looked at the email where my mother admitted to spending my inheritance on family expenses. Then she looked at me and said, "Do you want your money back?" "No," I said. "I want something else." "What?" "I want the land. The 20-acre plot in the Columbia River Gorge, the one my father had inherited from his mother, the one my mother had conveniently forgotten to mention in our inheritance conversation. Because here's what I had discovered in my research. That land wasn't just valuable for the basalt deposit. A tech company had been quietly acquiring property in the area for a new data center, and they were willing to pay top dollar. How much top dollar? $5 million. My mother didn't know. She thought the land was worthless. She had never bothered to check. But I had. And I had the paperwork to prove that my father had intended to leave that land to both of his daughters equally. It was in his will. The original will, not the one my mother had updated after his death. Catherine filed the lawsuit in October. We didn't ask for money. We asked for the land to be transferred to me as partial compensation for the stolen inheritance. My mother fought it. Of course she did. She hired a lawyer. She tried to claim I was mentally unstable. She tried to claim the money I had given them was gifts, not loans. But I had the receipts, every single one. In January of 2023, the judge ruled in my favor. The land was transferred to my name. My mother was ordered to pay my legal fees. And the stolen inheritance? The judge called it a pattern of financial exploitation. My mother had to sell the house to pay her lawyer. Jessica's marriage lasted 8 months. Marcus left her when he found out about the debt. She moved back in with my mother, who was now living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Gresham. And me? I sold the land to the tech company in March. $5 million, just as I had predicted. After taxes and legal fees, I walked away with $3.2 million. I bought a small house in the woods outside Portland. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a garden, a porch where I drink my coffee in the morning. I quit my job. I started writing. I started healing. And 3 weeks ago, my mother called me. She was crying. Real tears this time. Not the performative ones she used to deploy at family gatherings. "Elena, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jessica and I have nothing left. The apartment is being sold out from under us. We don't have anywhere to go." I listened. I thought about the $94,000. I thought about the inheritance. I thought about the wedding. I thought about every birthday I had spent alone, every sacrifice I had made, every time I had been told I was too dramatic for wanting to be seen. I thought about the 30th birthday they forgot. I thought about the cashmere coat Jessica was wearing when she called me stupid. I thought about my mother saying, "You'll be fine." And I made my decision. "Can you help us?" Just this once? Please? No, I said. Elena, please. No, Mom. You don't get to ask me for anything ever again. You stole from me. You lied to me. You used me. And you never, not once, treated me like a daughter. You treated me like an ATM. I've changed. Have you? Or do you just need money? Silence. That silence told me everything. That's what I thought. I hung up. Then I blocked her number. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Here's what I've learned. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who sees you, who values you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. My mother never saw me. My sister never valued me. My father was too lost in his own pain to notice any of it. For years, I thought if I just tried harder, worked more, gave more, they would finally love me the way I needed to be loved. But you can't buy love. You can't earn respect, and you can't force someone to see your worth if they're determined to look the other way. The best revenge isn't screaming. It isn't fighting. It isn't even winning in court. The best revenge is walking away and building a life so full, so peaceful, so genuinely happy that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. I have my house in the woods. I have my garden. I have my peace. And my mother and sister have each other. That's not revenge. That's just consequences. The last time I saw my mother cry was in that lawyer's office. She wasn't crying because she missed me. She wasn't crying because she regretted what she had done. She was crying because, for the first time, she couldn't use me anymore. And that, more than the money, more than the land, more than the lawsuit, was the real victory. Because I finally stopped being useful. And I started being free. You know, the strange thing about being the family ATM? Nobody notices you're human until the machine stops working. And by then, it's too late to insert your card. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I want to know, would you have forgiven them? Would you have helped when they called? Or would you have done the same thing I did? Comment Team Boundaries if you think I made the right choice. Comment Team Family if you think I should have helped. And if you've ever been the family member who gives everything and gets nothing, comment Receipts. Let me know I'm not alone. Also tell me in the comments, what's the worst thing a family member has ever said to you? I read every single comment. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Andrea's Revenge Stories. We post new stories every week about boundaries, justice, and the quiet power of walking away. And if you want to hear what happened next, because yes, there's more, click the video on your screen right now. It's called My Sister Faked a Pregnancy to Get My Inheritance. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'm Elena. This has been Andrea's Revenge Stories. Remember, the strongest boundaries aren't loud. They're calm. They're final. And they're unshakable.